a comedian loves to make somebody laugh, right? Like if you ever hang
Yeah,
out with somebody who is a comedian, they just want that laugh, right? And
yeah.
for me, I love to hang out with people and see the joy in their face when they eat something that they're like, "Damn, this is good."
Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Anissa Tova. And today I'm thrilled to have a very dear friend and a pretty accomplished attorney, Michael LoFrumento, joining us. And he's a founding partner of the firm called Stempel, Catterson, LoFrumento, Carlson, Biondo. And he's made quite a name for himself in the matrimonial field. He's been recognized as a super lawyer since 2014, but beyond his legal accolades, Michael is known for his writing, his appellate work, his dedication to charitable causes, and there are so many layers that I cannot wait to uncover and to dive in. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you. I mean, we chatted a few times, and each time I uncover something interesting and more interesting. Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell me, why did you pick a law school over culinary school and became a lawyer instead of a chef?
Oh, that's a great question. I I love to cook. I love to entertain. Um, for me, I always thought that cooking could be something I could fall back on and treat as a hobby. And I always had, really from a very young age, was kind of peculiar actually, a desire to be an attorney or, shortstop for the New York Yankees. One of those two, I figured being an attorney was a little more attainable.
How so?
Well, look, I realized I couldn't hit once I got to my senior year in high school. So not being able to hit, that certainly puts a damper on being shortstop for the New York Yankees. I can throw, and I could cook a lot better than I could actually field a ground ball. So that I decided at that point that cooking would be a hobby, and I would really focus on going to law school.
So now you went to law school and you're not just any attorney. I mean, you chose family law and I mean that's not an easy field. What drew you to that? I mean, how do you deal with and then what drew you to that particular field? And then how do you deal with the emotional impact?
You know, in college, I think truly began to gravitate towards family law. Um, I had some friends who came from abused households, who came from uh, they were a product of divorce. It really resonated to the point where when I was at the University of Massachusetts for my honors thesis, I focused on whether or not the battered woman syndrome was a bona fide science and a legitimate defense to someone who committed a violent act, against a spouse or a significant other. I was privileged enough to be able to interview the Framingham Eight. Those were eight women who were convicted of murdering their spouses or significant others.
Wow.
And I'm not saying because of my paper, but when I graduated University of Massachusetts, the then Governor Weld actually pardoned the Framingham Eight, and they recognized the legitimacy of really the battered woman syndrome, and that kind of catapulted me, I would say, to really wanting to focus on family law, specifically, people who were victims of domestic violence. And then once I went to law school, my first year, I received a grant to spend the summer with what was then called the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and that really got me into the world of family law, and I stayed.
Domestic violence, is that does that also extend beyond, the physical abuse? Are there other layers to it that sometimes, I don't want to say it goes unnoticed, but some would call it sort of a gray line, verbal abuse, financial abuse.
Yeah, that's a great question, Denise. And you said something that is so true. Oftentimes it goes unrecognized. Uh, Psychological abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse, all those are things that are difficult to identify. We can see a bruise, we can see a broken arm, we can see, a hospital record reflecting, some violent incident. But oftentimes we can't see, really the torture that can go on in a marriage or in a relationship. And we see it, we see it, often as divorce attorneys, that type of abuse.
Wow. I have tremendous respect for what you do. It'd be tough not to, well, let me actually direct it back to you. Is there part of you, I don't know even how to ask that. Is there part of you sometimes that it must be hard not to take it almost personally, not to be touched by it, impacted by it in some way, where there's a shift in energy as you're listening to some of these stories. How do you deal with that? How do you sort of balance it out, when you get home and you don't lose the sense of yourself?
I think that takes practice, truthfully.
Yeah.
I've been doing this now for over 20 years.
Mm.
And it's something that at the beginning, you certainly took it home. Um, and it's not just what we were just talking about as far as, whether there's domestic violence involved. It's really, you're dealing with people's lives and you're navigating them through probably the most difficult time of their life. And when you're dealing with, and then you throw children into the equation, you're really dealing with this array of emotions that, at times can be difficult to navigate. But I think the good divorce practitioner is actually able to distance themselves because it's good for the client. It's good for the client to receive that perspective where we can actually take a step back and show them what really may be happening around them. Oftentimes when we're in the midst of trauma, maybe our brain's not working as perfectly as we would like it to work, and that's kind of our job. Our job is to refocus them and to recenter them to where they need to be to get to point B, which is everybody's goal.
Yeah, that is difficult. I've had a few practitioners on the show who claim that they're able to sort of compartmentalize and these things, and I wonder, how you can do that effectively. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. You're a parent, you're a husband, you're a family man. Um, how would you say parenting had impacted your career?
Oh, I'm a much better attorney today that as a father of two, I have a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old. It gives you perspective. I think anytime that you have perspective, it makes you potentially better at something. And look, getting back to your previous question, I do have a family and I need to make sure that I'm there for my family and that I'm giving them as much energy as I'm giving my practice or my clients, right? So you do need to be able to have that separation. You do have to be able to set those boundaries with your clients that this isn't necessarily a 24/7 job, right? That I actually will go to my child's rowing event or my son's, baseball or basketball games and be present in their lives. I think that's a huge, y- you know, um, component to this as well. So I'm not quite sure if I answered your question or if I backtracked.
No, I won't let you skip it. And I know for a fact that you do prioritize your children's events. I I think you've shared with me actually, it was a client story, right, where there was an important sort of a hearing, but and you needed to choose. At the end, though, client understood, and I probably even respected your decision to show up at the event, and at the same time, were able to resolve your client situation.
Yeah, when you have major milestones, whether they're graduations, communions, confirmations, whatever it may be, those are things that are must attend events. And on this particular occasion, there was a must attend event that I had to be at and wanted to be at. You know, and we certainly were on for trial the following day, but we were very close to settlement, and I had a choice, right? I could have stayed and done that and missed my son's event, or simply say, guys, look, let's put a tourniquet on this for a couple hours. I need to go attend to an event, and I'll be in. Why don't we reconvene at this time? And we were all able to do that, and we were all able to get it to where it needed to be. Maybe a little bit later, than it would have been, but we still got it done.
Yep. So you really do walk the talk. I know being an athlete, that's always been part of your life, your personal life, your children's lives. I mean, you're a coach, right?
I am. Yep. Yeah, I run a travel baseball program in Massapequa called the Cyclones, and I've coached for the last, I would say, 20 years basketball and baseball.
How how do
It's a huge part of my life.
yeah. Yeah. It really is, and not just showing up in terms of time. I think mindset too. I mean, how does that particularly help you deal with, with in your practice, whether it's working with your team, dealing with your clients?
Yeah, look, I think first off, I think athletics are an amazing thing for children to be a part of. It provides you structure, it provides you discipline, and that then translates into academics and the structure and the discipline that you need to excel there, which then only then transfers into your work and your own personal life. So, and a lot of what I do, I'm a coach to my clients, I'm a coach to my staff, I'm a coach to my players. That's part of our job, right? To make people better as a coach. To give them the tools that they need to accomplish their goals. Um, so for me, I've had coaches in my life who have been incredibly impactful, uh, and were a great influence on me, and is a big reason why I'm here doing what I'm doing today.
Hmm. Now I know that you have a few causes that are dear to your heart, and remember you sharing with me about your experience at the hole in the wall camp, gang camp, and when earlier on, which was incredibly moving. Paul Newman was a mentor to you during that
He
time.
was.
Yeah, tell me the story, how you got involved and how it impacted you.
Oh boy, that the Hole in the Wall Game Camp is one of the greatest organizations that one could have the privilege of being a part of. It shaped a time period of my life that, again, made me who I am today. So Paul Newman was an amazing actor and philanthropist, and he created the Newman's own line of products. And the money that's generated from the Newman's own products go to various philanthropic uh, places, one of which is the Hole in the Wall Game Camp. So every camper attends there for free. They are suffering from some sort of cancer or blood disorder. Um, they were recruiting on my campus at the University of Massachusetts, and they were looking for camp counselors and for counselors to be part of not only a unit but also for activities like horseback riding or adventure or whatever the case might be. I had a very dear friend of mine that uh, was there, and we applied for full-time positions and got the position. And
Wow.
I can tell you it was some of the best 3 years of my life. I learned a lot more from those campers than I'm sure that I imparted to them. Uh, but what an amazing organization. Paul Newman, what an amazing human being. So giving, a larger than life figure who was not egotistical, was not above himself, was so giving and loving, as were really every person that I worked with at that camp. And and I'm in touch with many of them still today, including campers.
Wow. I know there are a few other causes that are dear to your heart, right?
Yeah, I'm the vice chair of EAC, which is a nonprofit organization here in New York, and we service Nassau, Suffolk, all the boroughs. We really provide services for every stage in life, from birth all the way through the elderly, and it's it's an amazing organization. We actually have our Building Bridges Gala coming up in October at the Garden City Hotel. Uh, and in essence, what we do is, we raise money for all these programs that Nassau and Suffolk have to offer, and the boroughs, whether it's there's somebody who's reentering society after serving time, whether it's there's somebody who's in need of help because of a particular addiction, all the way to teaching new parents how to install a car seat appropriately. And so it really does run the gamut of services that we can provide. Amazing organization. Neela Lockhill is our CEO, and she's brings such tremendous energy to the cause. And the other one is Help America Here. Where we I'm the vice chair of that board as well, where we provide hearing aids for those that cannot afford them. Uh, when my wife was going through some hearing issues, this presented itself, and I was really surprised that the cost associated with hearing aids, which is not covered by insurance, incidentally, which blows me away. And the real need for people to have these devices. And I can tell you this: there are very few things in life that are better than going to a fitting with somebody who's had complete loss of hearing for 15, 20 years and has not been able to afford a hearing aid. And all of a sudden they hear, their husband's voice for the first time in 15, 20 years, their wife's voice, their child's voice. It's really an amazing thing. And Mitch Shapiro, our founder, is an amazing human being who, started this many, many years ago. And Greg Thomas, our chairman, does a tremendous job as well. We try to do as many missions as we can a year, and meaning fittings, and we give away approximately, I think this year was $50,000 in college scholarships to uh, students who are hearing impaired. They change lives. I mean, it's a pretty amazing organization.
I I have goosebumps right now. The way you described it. Wow. I mean, say no more. You're right. Had actually a family member who's since passed away, but that was a struggle. Um, wow, that is really truly incredible, Michael. We go through ups and downs in life, and we go through our shares of losses and challenges. And was there a profound loss that had an impact on you, and how would you say it that you'd like to share, and how that shaped you, your outlook on life?
Yeah, look, I'm sure, one of the reasons why I gravitated to the hole in the wall game camp was when I was a boy. One of my very good friends had passed away from pediatric cancer. Back then, the medical science wasn't anywhere near where it is today, where, if a fifth grader was diagnosed with leukemia, it was a coin flip. These days, certain forms of leukemia have in excess of a 90% cure rate. The Tim, if he was born today or in fifth grade today, would have had over a 90% chance of living, most likely. But back in the mid '80s, that wasn't necessarily the case. Is so an amazing human being who was taken way too soon, but I am sure was the catalyst as to why I gravitated to the hole in the wall. That was probably one of the most profound losses. Uh, I recently lost my father 3 years ago. That was difficult. Uh, for somebody who was my coach,
Mm.
that was tough. But as I said to my kids, what they survive with what they taught you, right? So I'm imparting now a lot of the things that my dad taught me and coached me, with to my children, and that's how his spirit lives on through what he was able to teach me and sometimes get through my stubborn head, uh, which now I can impart on my kids. Yeah.
How do they take it when you're coaching them?
Kids who aren't my kids take it, very well. And my son and I just yesterday. My son's a very talented athlete, and he wanted to go shoot uh, and practice some shots. He wanted to throw up a few hundred shots just to kind of get his form right. Basketball tryouts are in November, and he was doing something, and I was explaining to him what he had to do in a coachable kind of a way, and he kept making excuses. And I said, "Well, look, are you coachable or not? Because you're just going. And if it wasn't me, if this was your basketball coach telling you this, you'd say yes, coach, right? But I'm telling it to him, so sometimes there's a little bit of give and take. But I think that's just a natural father son dynamic.
Yeah, no, I definitely I feel that. I've been through it. It's
Whereas
yeah,
I
I
tell you
mean,
what, I tell you, my daughter was completely different. My daughter, when I
really?
coached her, I don't coach her in rowing. I don't know anything about the sport, but she used to play basketball, and um, she had a completely different reaction to me. She was, very much singularly focused, always looked at me in the eye, and
Well,
just ate it up like a sponge. Now my son still does that, but there's a little bit of, angst at times,
little resistance, just a little bit. Yeah.
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Wow. So tell me about your passion for cooking. So how, wait a second. I know you're Italian. How did how did, it's probably a strange question being Italian. How did you sort of cultivate that? But I sense that it's more than just enjoying to cook. Where did that come from? This passion for it?
Growing up, I grew up in a relatively large family. I'm Italian Irish, so my mom's from Bayside, Queens, Irish. My dad's from Bronx, New York, Italian, and so both sides had large families. So growing up, we would every celebration was around food, right? Whether it's the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
holidays, a Sunday dinner, we all came together around food and wine for that matter. So for me, I think it was just a natural kind of transition. My mom was a tremendous cook, so I got to witness her, in the kitchen. She was a stay-at-home mom raising three kids, and made some phenomenal dishes, and I used to help her. And so that I think joy of getting together with family and friends and entertaining, um, it just became a passion of mine.
And
A
wine.
comedian,
So
a comedian loves to make somebody laugh, right? Like if you ever hang
yeah,
out with somebody who is a comedian, they just want that laugh, right? And
yeah.
for me, I love to hang out with people and see the joy in their face when they eat something that they're like, "Damn, this is good," right?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great
Yeah.
feeling. I'm bringing them some joy.
No, I know what you mean. It's the energy. Yeah, people do sort of
Yeah.
loosen up, and they sort of forget about everything else. They stay in a moment. You're right. And do you, at least growing up in Eastern Europe, I still remember sort of the smells. And I used to, same thing. I used to actually help my mom cook, and me and my sister started cooking when we were 8 years old, and it was to the point where you didn't have to rely on measurements, right? It was just you sort of eyeballed it, and then you just kind of do it instinctually. How do you sometimes like recall the memory of like smelling something that you smelled at a childhood, and it just feels
Oh
good?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, my mom had some signature dishes that were great. I mean, and her sauce was a lot different than mine, right? It was a little bit different, but that the smell of her sauce, the smell of chicken parm in the oven. My grandmother made this great vinegar chicken dish that vinegar and garlic that you can, when I make it, it brings you back to that, kind of that childhood. But it's funny that you say about the measuring because my wife is the baker, right? I'm the cook. So baking is very scientific. You have to have
Yes.
everything measured out perfectly, and and you put her in a situation to cook, and she sees me there just kind of cooking to taste, and I can feel her getting stressed by the fact that I'm not, measuring it out.
Yeah.
But it is a very organic thing, cooking. I love it.
And wine. You don't just drink wine, you make wine.
I do. I do. I have two very close friends, and we began making wine together a few years ago. I'm not proud of that first batch, which was real bathtub wine. That was absolutely terrible and not drinkable. But then we graduated to this a facility here on the island that you can actually source the grapes. You can press the grapes. You can go through the process of putting them into oak casks, tasting the wine every month out, and we age it for about 14 months. Right now, we're waiting on a Montepulciano that should be ready in about a month and a half. You'll get a bottle,
Mm,
Denise.
of course, that's given. That's a must. Although, wait a second, does not this the isn't part of the process actually what's a part of the process where everybody steps in the barrel of the grapes and with their bare feet? I
So we don't we don't I love Lucy it. We don't do that, but I will tell you it's great. So they have a machine, they have a pressing machine, right? So
thankfully.
you source the grapes. It comes out on a conveyor belt. You make sure you get the stems and the leaves and all that stuff out, and then you dump it into a giant vat, and then it goes from that into the pressing, and it really is just a old fashioned press that you crank, and you see the grape juice, coming out the bottom of it, and the skins are left behind. So it really is a tremendous amount of fun. And the best part about it is the bottling process. You get the families together, you bottle the wines, and cook a great meal, and you get to taste the literal fruits of your labor, for the last 14
Literally.
months. Yeah, it's uh, uh, it really is a lot of fun,
Mm,
and it's
that
good to
that really,
impart that to our kids, right? Like we
yeah.
we have a tradition of bottling our canning our tomatoes every year. So in 2 weeks in my house, we get 15 bushels of tomatoes. We'll clean them, we'll cook them down, we'll put them through the tomato grinder, and we'll jar our own sauce. That sauce
Mm.
will last us for most of the year. I do it with the same two families that we do the wine with, and we make that a big event where our neighbors come over and have some wine and make some sauce.
Wow, that's heaven. I'm hungry now. I mean, and you can taste the difference, really. Having a fresh grown
Oh yeah.
tomatoes, yeah, we used to grow them in back in Europe too, from my grandmother's garden. It was like a night and day than the store-bought stuff. So, and you're right, the process of the enjoyment of seeing your kids just getting into it. Are both of your kids into cooking or not so much?
My daughter Ava is a tremendous baker. She really is. She's very, very good at it. My son is recently getting into cooking, but really just for nourishment to get his protein pr- macros up. you know,
Yep. Yep.
his cooking now is browning up some ground beef and rice.
Meal
But
prep,
he'll get there.
meal prep, man. You got to
Meal
load
prep,
up. That's
exactly
right.
right.
Carb up.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so he'll get there though.
Wow.
I think both of them will.
Yeah. So, you're a little bit of a Jets fan, right?
Oh, very much so. Yeah,
It's just a
yeah,
little bit. Yes.
yeah.
What's your hope for the season?
As Jet fans, we're very careful with the H word, right? I mean that's
Yep.
I've spent 50 years hoping, and my son, my son said it best last year when he said that it's child abuse that I raised him a Jet fan when Aaron Rodgers went down because we are cursed, right? Um, I don't think we are. I am upset about the Reddick situation, and we don't have to get into too much football talk, but I am upset about that. It just feels that like that is a cloud that's over the Jets going into the first week. But like every optimistic Jets fan, my son thinks that we'll be 13-3 after 16 weeks. I don't see that happening, but I hope he's right.
You know that and I can see both sides. It's tough to be with someone who's lived longer and experienced a lot. It's almost like you get so close and then it's like, ugh, and so close. And it's like at some point you start thinking they have to be cursed. I mean, this is just so you're waiting for the moment, but if you have sort of somebody coming in looking from the outside in, they're looking at you like, what are you talking about? There's always a hope. There's
The,
always a
the,
chance.
the Jets
They're
have
just going to do it.
the Jets have yeah the Jets haven't made the playoffs since my son was born. He'll be 16 in February, right? So he is yet to see a Jets playoff game. I mean, it's notwithstanding that I still have some Jets over my shoulder out of picture here. I love them. I will root for them, and I'll get on the train of being optimistic again. Most likely, only to be disappointed again.
Yeah, that sounds so familiar. Okay, question for you. I'm actually interested. If you were, if you know enough, if you were a coach, what changes would you make? Really, really changes. I'm not talking about, play strategy. Like, what do you think it would take? What would you do to?
You know what? I think what the Jets did this year, I thought their draft was great. I
Mhm.
can see why people are optimistic about the Jets this year. The one issue that I have with the Jets is we'll go back to the Reddick situation. I don't understand how you trade for somebody and you don't already have a contract in place for him, and they needed an edge rusher. They traded away a very good edge rusher. So I'm not quite sure why they would have pulled off a trade without having Reddick locked up.
Hmm.
And to me, that's just it's basic common sense. And so I'm I'm not quite sure, why that occurred. I'm sure there might be some, moving parts that I'm unaware of. But to the casual fan, that's a mistake, and that was a big screw up.
You would not have done it as a coach.
As a GM, if I'm trading for
GM.
Reddick,
Yeah.
if I'm trading for Reddick, I'm making sure that I already have a deal in place with Reddick before I finalize that trade.
Yeah.
And they clearly did not have that, or maybe there was just miscommunication on both sides. Who knows what? But the Jets give up talent to get a fantastic edge rusher, and we have nothing to show for it with a week away from the season starting. Yeah, so that's frustrating as a Jet fan.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear that. And I remember I don't know where we shot the other episode. It was all football talk, but you know, how would how would your family describe you when you're actually watching one of those close games?
I'm a lot more reserved now than I was. My son is a little bit more animated than I am watching the game. He'll
Really?
he'll uh, he'll yell and scream, but I have been known to on occasion have an outburst or two when I'm watching the game. For the most part, and look, I'm the rare combination of a Yankees fan, a Rangers fan, and a Jets fan, right?
Mhm.
And so I had a lot
Yeah.
of heartbreak growing up as a Yankees fan, also up and until
Mm.
'96 when they went on their run. Um, but I always feel dread watching the Jets. We could be up 30 points in the fourth quarter, and I
Mm.
still somehow think it's not over. And so I don't really have many outbursts. I'm more looking at the TV, wondering how we're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
So it's more
Mm.
watching with dread than anything else.
Yeah. That's just so familiar. Yep. It's like, yeah, no, you can be too content. You can be too it's not even getting to the final score. It's not even you just don't feel content until you see the final score and you automatically assume the worst. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that's it's
Now
like
my
a love
wife,
and
now
hate
my
relationship.
it is. Now my wife would say that I lose all hearing other than the game itself while the game is on, and uh,
That's good.
and that may be true because I know there have been many
Yeah.
instances where she's talking to me and I have no idea that there's another human being speaking.
Oh boy, I would have loved to have you here, have her here today at this interview. Yeah, maybe we should do that actually. Um, yeah, no, that's great. Michael, any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
Now, you know what? I think what you're doing is fantastic. I've watched a lot of the podcasts. It's so nice to getting to know people that I know from afar and respect, from afar as attorneys or whatever capacity they may be in my world. And it it really is a tremendous show. I think you're knocking it out of the park. I really think you're doing a great
Thank
job,
you.
and I really appreciate you having me on. It's a lot of fun. Talking to you is fun.
Likewise, likewise. And and you actually made a good point is just really focusing outside of the profession and the titles and because many times you think you know somebody even decade goes by and you realize you really do not. So I appreciate your willingness to share your story, and we'll definitely have you back, especially with the football season rocking. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to coming back.
So to our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Michael LoFrumento and how to get in touch with him, click on his bio link below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media platforms. And until next time, stay inspired and stay curious.